Molly took a sharp inhalation, her gaze locking with Thomas's. "You're relentlessly focused on the idea that Democrats just needed more courage, that they were afraid. But you are completely glossing over the seismic political realignment that happened when the Supreme Court decision relegated abortion to the states. That ruling entirely rewrote the political map. You are no longer waging one federal campaign that unifies 50 states against a central point. You are now mired in 50 distinct, hyper-local conflicts. For a national party, that is an operational and financial catastrophe. The entire premise of fighting state by state is nonsensical. The average citizen doesn't operate that way. A voter facing a pregnancy isn't mapping out a 9-month legislative strategy to flip their statehouse. Humans respond to national dangers. When that thread was fractured, the political energy dissipated, and the message simply could not penetrate the fragmented media ecosystem we've been discussing. The fundamental structural breakdown wasn't cowardice about Joe Rogan, it was the fact that their single most powerful unifying argument had its national platform surgically removed. And that failure is perfectly mirrored at the local level. Thomas countered, redirecting the topic sharply back to New York. The Mandami situation is the ultimate case study in the Democratic Party's preference for ideological purity over functional competence. We see Mandami attempting to placate the real estate developers, the people who truly control the city, trying to cast himself as a pragmatic operator. But how do you propose to maintain the essential framework, the very tendons of a modern city, when your organizing principle is that capitalism is theft? You cannot declare ideological war on the entire system and then expect the system's managers to dutifully maintain the schools and sanitation. Running a city is an executive task, Molly, not a philosophical one. And this entire uproar Cuomo is generating about Mandami's rent control department, which is transparently a non-issue, is a strategic feint. It's a diversion from the only question that matters. Does Mandami have the managers? Does he possess the infrastructural know-how? Cuomo, who understands this city's labyrinthine bureaucracy better than anyone, knows the focus must be on capability, not on the socioeconomic status of a 33-year-old's parents or his monthly rent. This is the trap politics falls into, obsessing over the superficial to avoid confronting the immense, difficult work of actual governance. That precise kind of superficiality is a direct echo of the cultural erosion in modern dating. Thomas pressed on. The data shows 79% of Gen Z reporting dating app exhaustion. And 1 in 6 American women are now opting for celibacy. I actually believe this rejection of the apps is a profoundly healthy sign. We have engineered a social shift toward the virtual, where the high achievers on these platforms kill the market, setting an impossible standard. This is the void that AI girlfriends, those utterly antiseptic replacements, are filling. People are fleeing to them because they are incapable of handling the complexity of a real human dynamic. The second they encounter a small point of friction, an unavoidable difficulty, they don't work through it, they just swipe, replacing the person, trapping themselves in a perpetual loop of the initial, curated phase of attraction. It is genuinely preferable to meet someone in a bar when you're both intoxicated. Because at least that is grounded in a messy, tangible reality. And that reality, Molly conceded, depends entirely on the subconscious signals we are systematically eliminating. You cannot get an accurate read on a person over the phone. You're missing the pheromones, the micro-expressions, the posture. It's all information we process. Even if we're not aware of it, we should, bizarrely, learn from that Alaska summit where Putin and Trump insisted on meeting face to face. Acknowledging that for high-stakes human interaction, you require that visceral, in-person feedback. The problem is that the system itself now makes that visceral connection profoundly terrifying. This hunt for a predictable, friction-free life extends directly to our entertainment, Thomas argued, returning to the show's opening theme. Why on earth would China's hosting of the first humanoid robot games be compelling? I don't watch Google's Alpha play stockfish in chess, and I have no desire to see automatons compete in athletics. We are drawn to sports. I love the big three, and I'm a diehard Nadal fan. It broke my heart when Djokovic beat his record. We love them because of the human imperfection. It is the striving for excellence despite our known limitations that is compelling. When a machine fails, it doesn't feel regret, it just recalibrates its algorithm. It lacks the essential human pathos that gives the struggle meaning. We are culturally conditioning ourselves to become those same calculating, unfeeling machines. But the motive for seeking predictability isn't philosophical. It's about survival. Molly countered sharply. You romanticize complexity, but that complexity has been weaponized by the political system to jeopardize basic human requirements. Look at the mifepristone situation, Costco ceasing its sale, blaming lack of demand. Why does the very idea of buying an abortion pill in bulk at a warehouse store feel so degrading and absurd? Because it reduces an essential medical need to a shameful commercial transaction. And we must remember, mifepristone isn't just for abortion, it is used for a wide range of complicated, frankly unpleasant, uterine conditions. But thanks to this synthetic culture war, insurance providers are now dropping coverage for birth control and other essential medications, labeling them woke. This forces people to acquire these two drug series treatments in humiliating contexts. We're talking about the total loss of privacy, having to take medication in a Costco bathroom, or buying it in the checkout line. This is the direct consequence of politicizing basic healthcare. The Democratic Party's failure to break through on democracy or abortion is a symptom of a much larger systemic collapse. They are allowing the political environment to make every part of life, from finding intimacy to getting medical care, excessively difficult, expensive, and stripped of fundamental human dignity. You cannot win an election if you have forgotten that governance is, first and foremost, about making life manageable for the people you claim to represent. Thomas let out a short, sharp breath, running a hand over his face. You've done it again, Molly. You've taken a concrete, solvable problem, management, and elevated it into an abstract, unsolvable crisis of human dignity. Dignity doesn't fill a pothole. Dignity doesn't negotiate a union contract for sanitation workers. You say, making life manageable, and I hear, logistics. You're looking at the Costco debacle and seeing a culture war casualty. I look at it and see a catastrophic failure of supply chain management, regulatory foresight, and basic economic planning. The embarrassing transaction you describe as a symptom of incompetence, not the disease itself. The disease is that the party in charge, the party that claims to be the adult in the room, is utterly incapable of governing the basic mechanics of daily life. And that is precisely why the Mandami wing of the party is so terrifying. They don't just ignore management, they are philosophically, morally opposed to it. He leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a boardroom secret. These ideologues, Mandami included, despise the very mechanisms that allow a complex society to function. They see management as a tool of oppression. They believe logistics are a capitalist conspiracy. How can you run a city of 8 million people when you genuinely believe the organizational charts are the enemy? You can't. You can't simultaneously declare war on the system and also be trusted to operate the system. That's the fundamental disconnect. And while you're worried about the indignity of buying medicine at Costco, I'm worried about the fact that under their leadership, the medicine won't even be at Costco. Because the people who know how to get it there will have been driven out by a new People's Committee on Pharmaceutical Distribution, run by a 24-year-old sociology major. Molly shook her head, her patience clearly wearing thin. Thomas, you are deliberately confusing the tool with the intent. You're a hammer fanatic in a world where everyone is screaming about being hit by a hammer. Of course logistics matter, but you are willfully blind to the political intent behind the failures. The difficulty in accessing mifepristone isn't an accidental supply chain kink. It is a deliberate strategy of systemic hostility. They are creating friction to punish behavior they deem immoral. This isn't a management lapse, it's a weaponized bureaucracy. And that systemic hostility, that sense of a system rigged to make vulnerability prohibitively expensive, is exactly what Mandami is responding to, however clumsily. Clumsily? Thomas scoffed. Capitalism is theft isn't a clumsy slogan, it's an economic suicide note. It's a proclamation of strategic incompetence. Let's move past the slogan and look at the actual proposals. Shall we? He wants to municipalize the energy grid. A noble goal, perhaps. But who, specifically, will run it? Does he have a shadow cabinet of engineers and utility managers ready to take over? Or does he think the current coned executives, the ones who actually know how the grid works, will happily stay on for a 90% pay cut out of ideological solidarity? He wants universal rent control. Fine. Watch every developer, every pension fund, every shred of private capital flee the city. Watch the tax base evaporate. And then watch your precious dignity programs and manageable life initiatives starve to death. Because the infrastructure you claim to care about has crumbled. It's the rock'em sock'em robot theory of governance. Just knock the block off the bad guy and assume a magical, functional head will appear in its place. It doesn't. And the alternative you're proposing is what? Exactly? Molly shot back. The status quo? The competent centrism that Obama is maneuvering to protect? The very model that allowed this grotesque level of wealth inequality to metastasize for decades? The model that looks at a generation drowning in debt, unable to buy a home or afford a child, and tells them the only problem is a messaging failure. Mandami's rhetoric is a fire alarm. Thomas, you're just complaining about the noise instead of acknowledging the building is on fire. People are desperate for someone to at least name the theft they feel every single day when their paycheck vanishes. Even if the slogan is imprecise. Obama's fear, the reason he's putting his thumb on the scale so hard he's breaking it, is that he knows the center is hollow. It has no answer to the fire. It's just a promise to manage the ashes more efficiently. Competence is the answer, Thomas insisted, his voice rising. But the centrists, the Obamas, the adults, are too afraid to sell it. Which brings me back to my first fundamental point. They fear the megaphone. You agreed. You said, go everywhere. But they won't. They won't go on Rogan. They won't go on the Milk Boys. Not because they fear the digital drowning you described, but because they are terrified of being exposed as having nothing compelling to say to those 80 million people. You cannot defend a hollow center in a 3-hour, unscripted, high-friction conversation. It's not the platform they fear, Molly. It's the spotlight. It's the profound intellectual and charismatic vacuum at the heart of their own party. They can't win the argument, so they smear the arena. That is profoundly naive, and you know it, Molly said, her tone flat and cold. You're ignoring the asymmetric nature of the battlefield. It is a digital drowning. You're forgetting the brutal lessons of the last election cycle. We did have candidates go everywhere. They sat down for the long-form interviews. And what was the result? The algorithm, the clip industrial complex, dismembered them. They spent 45 minutes giving a brilliant, nuanced breakdown of geopolitical trade policy. And the only thing that broke through was the 8-second clip of them fumbling a pronunciation, which was then remixed into a viral meme implying they were senile or drunk. The Washington Post interview is background noise. Yes, but the Rogan interview becomes live ammunition, fired back at you by the very platforms you're trying to engage. She leaned in, dropping the facade of exasperation for one of cold analysis. The unsubstantiated whispers. I heard about Rogan's team and favored candidates. It wasn't just about favorable silence. It was about the architecture of the interview itself. It's an environment engineered to find the one gaffe, the one moment of human fallibility, and amplify it into oblivion, while simultaneously giving the other side a pass, allowing them to ramble unchallenged about their own pseudoscientific research. It's a trap. It's not a neutral ground. It's an enemy-controlled processing plant designed to turn nuance into weakness. So yes, you have to go, but you are a fool if you go in thinking it's a fair fight. So we hide, Thomas concluded, slumping back in his chair. The picture of resignation. We retreat. We don't go on the show. We don't run the risky candidate. We don't have the difficult conversation. We behave exactly like the Gen Z dater you're defending. We refuse the friction. We see the potential for a gaffe as a red flag, and we swipe left. We abandon the entire relationship, the relationship with the voter, because it's hard and we might get hurt. We prefer the sterile, predictable AI girlfriend, which is precisely what the modern Democratic Party strategist wants. A voter base that is a clean, manageable algorithm, not a messy, smelling, complicated, human electorate that might, God forbid, disagree with them on one issue. He pointed a finger at her. You talked about the pheromones, the biometrics, the in-person signals. The dating apps filtered out the messy, uncontrollable human smell to create a predictable product. That is the Democratic Party's national strategy. They have filtered out the voters who smell wrong, the union plumber who owns a gun, the suburban mom who is terrified about the border but also wants abortion access, the small business owner who believes in climate change but hates Mandami's rhetoric. The party leadership cannot compute that complexity. The friction is too high. So they abandon the voter. They retreat to their safe, sterile platform and wonder why no one is listening. They are afraid of the human smell of the American electorate. Molly closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her strength. You keep using the word fear, Thomas, and I am trying, patiently, to tell you that it is exhaustion. The messy human connection. You keep romanticizing the drunken bar meeting. The high-friction political debate is a luxury. It is a luxury available only to those who have a safety net. Vulnerability has become a high-cost consumer item that most people can no longer afford. Why do you think people are choosing celibacy? Why are they turning to the AI companion? It is not a philosophical fear of friction, it is a pragmatic, economic fear of consequence. In this system, a bad relationship, an accidental pregnancy, a messy emotional entanglement, that isn't just human growth. It is a potential catalyst for financial Armageddon. It's the difference between paying rent and being evicted. It's the difference between stability and crippling medical debt. You cannot afford to be messy and vulnerable when your healthcare is tied to a job you despise and your rent consumes 70% of your income. The AI girlfriend isn't a replacement for human connection, she continued, her voice gaining a sharp, didactic edge. It is a substitute for the economic and social stability that used to make real human connection possible. People aren't recalculating like the robots you hate because they're training themselves to be sterile. They are recalculating because, in this economy, one miscalculation means total disaster. The system, the one you say is just a management problem, has engineered out the possibility of human failure. And that, Thomas, is the real, underlying, unmanageable crisis. It's not about the trains, or the slogans, or even the dignity of buying a pill at Costco. It's about a society that has lost any and all margin for error. That is the undignified, unmanageable reality that the centrists ignored, that the Democrats failed to name, and that Mandami, for all his catastrophic flaws, is at least screaming about at the top of his lungs. Thomas stared at her, the studio lights reflecting off his glasses. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. So we're stuck, a permanent, untenable stalemate. We have ideologues who can't manage, and we have managers who have no ideology, or at least none they're willing to defend in the public square. And caught in the middle, everyone is just swiping left on reality because it's too damn expensive. Or, Molly replied, it's a profound cultural crisis born directly from a logistical and economic nightmare. The very human fallibility you cherish in sports, the thing that makes you love Nadal, is the precise quality that our current political and economic system is designed to identify and punish. We can't have it both ways, Thomas. We can't build a virtual world that demands calculated, frictionless perfection and then wonder why people are terrified to be imperfectly, messily, and vulnerably human in their real ones. Thomas let the silence hang for a moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod, a mirthless smile touching his lips. That's a beautiful, tragic loop, Molly, a perfectly closed system. The economy crushes human vulnerability. So we retreat to a sterile virtual life. That virtual life, in turn, trains us to demand a sterile, frictionless politics. It's elegant, but it's also a profound, convenient, and total abdication of personal responsibility. You're painting a portrait of humanity as a passive object, a pinball bounced between systemic forces, with no agency of its own. You say people are forced into this calculating mindset. I say they are choosing it because it is, quite simply, easier. It is the path of least resistance. He leaned forward, as if to finally connect the two disparate threads of their conversation. This is the critical link you're missing. The ideological purity I've been railing against? The Mandami wing? That is the exact same cultural impulse as the AI girlfriend. It is a demand for a perfectly solvable world. Mandami's supporters, the ones who terrified Obama, don't want a manager. They don't want the human, fallible, messy process of governance. They don't want the friction of compromise with the real estate developers you despise but who, nonetheless, exist and hold power. They want a savior. They want an ideological algorithm. Capitalism is theft is a clean, binary equation. It's the rock'em sock'em robot all over again. Knock off the capitalist head, and a justice head magically pops up. It's a fantasy. It is the ultimate cultural failure, not just an economic one. They have mistaken a political platform for a dating app profile. Must believe the system is theft. Swipe left if you are a pragmatist. It is the relentless search for simulated perfection, applied to the one thing that can never be perfect, human society. Molly looked at him, her expression one of profound weariness. Thomas, you are pathologizing desperation and calling it a character flaw. You call it a choice to seek an easier path. As if the other paths haven't been systematically mined, booby-trapped, and set on fire. It is not a fantasy to demand that the system not actively extract every ounce of value from your life and leave you with the husk. What you call messy compromises and the hard, boring work of governance, for most people, that messy compromise just looks like the hollow center you yourself identified, politely negotiating the terms of their complete surrender. It's Obama, the master chess player, orchestrating a grand bargain which, coincidentally, always seems to bargain away their pensions, their wages, or their healthcare access for the sake of market stability. She straightened up, her voice taking on a harder, more analytical edge, and this fetishization of management as some neutral, apolitical good. That is the real fantasy. Thomas, that is the true, sterile replacement for an actual political belief. You are romanticizing the competent manager, the Cuomo type, the institutionalist who knows the bureaucracy. But that competence is never neutral. It is always competence in service of an agenda. And the agenda of the managers you so admire is, invariably, the preservation of the capital structure you claim is secondary. This is precisely where the dark money operations I mentioned come in. They are not attacking Mandama on his competence, simply because they have a civic-minded fear that the trains won't run on time. No, she continued, they are attacking him because they are terrified that he can run the trains, and that he will run them for the public good, in a way that fundamentally disrupts their private profit model. Those unsubstantiated whispers I told you about, they weren't just about the Rogan platform. I am hearing them everywhere now, specifically regarding this Mandama situation. The drumbeat about his managerial experience, the nonsense about his city council expense reports. That is not a good faith critique from concerned citizens. It is a coordinated, well-funded information operation, bankrolled by the very same real estate developers and private equity ghouls you say he must compromise with. They are engineering the narrative of his incompetence. They are creating the friction they want to make his form of governance impossible from day one. It is the exact same playbook as the media trap we discussed. You are sitting here wringing your hands about ideological purity, while the pragmatists you admire are engaged in a full-scale, asymmetric information war to protect their assets. They are the ones who truly fear the messy, human electorate. They just have the good sense to call their fear risk management and protecting the city's tax base. Thomas rolled his eyes so far back he seemed to be examining his own brain. It's always a conspiracy, Molly, always. A coordinated operation, a weaponized bureaucracy, a systemic trap. It can never just be simple, mundane, human incompetence. It can never just be a bad idea, badly executed. You see this vast, omnipotent, dark money hand. I see a bunch of idealistic kids who read a pamphlet, got handed the keys to a multi-trillion-dollar metropolis, and are now discovering that capitalism is theft, doesn't help you negotiate a snow removal contract. Your information war is just Cuomo being an opportunist shark, which is what he is. Your systemic hostility over the methopristone is just a purchasing manager at Costco looking at sales data and making a bottom-line decision. You're so deep in the systemic critique that you can't see the human reality on the ground. You have, in fact, proven my point. He jabbed a finger in her direction. You've become the very robot you're critiquing. You are just recalculating. You're taking every new piece of data, a rent-stabilized apartment, a pill pulled from a shelf, a failed election, and remorselessly recalculating it to fit your one grand, pre-existing algorithm. The system is rigged. There is no friction in your worldview. Molly, it's perfectly smooth. Every event confirms the premise. It's the cleanest, most sterile, most predictable ideology of all. Which, he concluded, slumping back, is why those humanoid robot games, they're not just stupid. They're the goal. They are the logical endpoint of your worldview. Not mine. A world where human fallibility, like, say, Mandami's incompetence, or a Democrat's fear, isn't just a mistake to be corrected or a weakness to be overcome. It's a moral crime. It's a deviation from the perfect algorithm of justice, to be identified and punished by an invisible, systemic force. You and Mandama, you don't want a manager. You want a perfect, infallible program. And when you don't get it, you blame the hardware. But the hardware, the messy, fallible, frightened, greedy, often wrong human beings, is all we've got. You can't manage that. You just have to live with it. And that, I think, is the friction you're all really, truly afraid of.